begin the record. And there we go. So thank you, Antoinette, for coming back and teaching us about further information regarding cybersecurity. And at this time, I'm going to turn it on over to you.
Sure thing. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So this is actually, I believe, our fourth series in this cybersecurity awareness training. And so the topic is going to be business email compromise. But if you've taken any of my previous trainings, you will see there's a lot of overlap in things that we've discussed in the past. So just be mindful. If you haven't, though, been to any of my other trainings, it's okay. I will fully explain everything as we go along. So I do ask, there's a very small group today. I do ask if you can to please turn your camera on. It just helps me when I have feedback of actual faces versus speaking to blank screens. I do love to have active participation. So ask questions in the chat if you have something that you don't understand. We might have, because it's such a small group, I might just open dialogue, have conversations with everybody. So by all means, you can unmute when we're talking. But I try to make cybersecurity as fun as possible. So please have fun. So if you could please post in the chat, just so I have an understanding of what everybody's roles are. If you could just post in the chat what you do in your library, if you are associated with a library or if you're a trustee, that would be really helpful for me, just to give me a little bit of context. But while you're doing that, I will introduce myself, and I apologize for anybody that has seen this slide 6 times or 7 times already. This will be the 7th time. But my name is Antoinette King. I actually live in Bloomingburg, New York. So I am local to the region. I started in the security industry over 20 years ago as a security technician in physical security. And excuse me, about 4 years ago, I went back to school for my master's. So I started with my bachelor's degree in managing security systems on the physical security side. And then I went back to school about 4 years ago to get my master's degree in cybersecurity policy and risk analysis, because I realized that physical security and cybersecurity really dovetail nicely together, and you can't have one without the other. So when I went back to school, as happens with many people who are passionate in a subject, my understanding of the global threat landscape completely changed. So it was no longer where I said, oh, nation states are fighting against nation states, but I realized that individual citizens and organizations were under attack through cybersecurity. And so I really, I took it upon myself to start my firm to try to educate people on how to stay safe online, educate organizations. I actually just published a book last week. I'm going to put the link in the chat if you're interested. It's called The Digital Citizen's Guide to Cybersecurity. The purpose of the book was really to demystify cybersecurity, make it fun. That every chapter has a different checklist of things. And in the first chapter about digital citizenship, I actually have what is the recipe to be a good digital citizen. And so I hope that this will help to kind of bring from the audiences of age 12 to 100, kind of bring some of these things down to earth so that it's not so scary, and help people to have actionable things they can do to protect themselves online. I have 2 incredible sons. One is 19, he's in Fordham. The other one goes to Pine Bush High School. He's a junior. And of course, my fur baby there, Avery, he's our pride and joy. He's 7. So most of you have put stuff in the chat about who you are as the adult services and director. So that's good. I appreciate that. So what our agenda today is going to look like is kind of defining what business email compromise is. I'll give you some background statistics on what the loss from business email compromise has been in the recent years. I'll also talk about how business emails compromise scams are carried out so that you'll understand kind of the anatomy of how it works. And then I will give you some information on how to report if your library or you are fall victim of a business email compromise. I'll give you information on how to report, who to contact, and also actionable steps that you can take to protect yourself, and also actionable steps that you can share with members of your library staff to protect themselves moving forward. So I always like to start with some fun little videos. Oh, hang on. I have to enable the audio settings up at the top. I apologize. Share sound. Okay. Thumbs up that you guys can.
This is CSEN News with Chet Barkley.
Shark Attack 2020. I guess sharks have to start looking out for scammers as well as killer whales. Real estate mogul and Shark Tank star Barbara Corcoran was duped out of almost $400,000 by an elaborate social engineering scheme. When they hooked that big fish, they must have been thinking, we're going to need a bigger bank. How many shark references are in this?
There's 4 more.
I'm not reading it. The reason we did this story is to show you that anyone can get hacked through phishing.
Even a shark.
This is your CSEN tip of the week.
Common phishing emails may pose as someone from a well-known company, even using real logos trying to trick you into clicking on it. Never click on links from an unknown sender before carefully vetting the address of a web page or URL. They also might use a web address that is similar to a well-known site to deceive you, so stay vigilant and don't get fooled into opening yourself up to trouble. That's your CSEN tip of the day.
Okay, until next time, I'm Chet Barkley.
So I love these little videos just to kind of bring some humor to it, but that actually is a true story. And when we talk about business email compromise, often we hear phishing emails and you think ransomware. This is the other side of phishing and social engineering. So what is business email compromise? Business email compromise is also known as an email account compromise. And it's basically a scam where criminals send an email message that appears to come from a known source, making a legitimate request. And typically it's financially focused. So usually it'll be an environment where, an email will come from what looks like a director, for example, asking the person that writes the checks or sends the checks to cut a check or wire money to a particular location. So I wanted to give you some examples where you may see a business email compromise be carried out. So not only is it internal within the organization, but you may get a business email compromise third party, right? So a vendor will send your company a regular, that you regularly deal with, an email with an invoice. And on the invoice, it might have an updated mailing address or ACH payment information to make payments on an invoice. Oftentimes, that's a way in which it actually happened to a colleague of mine. He is a supplier to his customers. His email account got compromised, and what they did was they searched through his inbox and outbox to see what kind of emails he sent, and they were using QuickBooks. And with QuickBooks, there is a QR code embedded with a link to make a bank transfer. And what the criminal actors did was they put his email address as if it was going from there, but they actually created a different email in the background. So it was a spoofed email. And then they changed they kept the invoice exactly the same, and they changed the hyperlink behind the QR code to transfer to a bank that's offshore. So be mindful that this isn't just something where your email addresses can be compromised, but it could be from a third party asking you to wire or transfer money. Another example is, a CEO emails an assistant and asks her to purchase dozens of gift cards. This actually has been happening a lot lately. I actually got this from a colleague of mine in an industry association, asking to buy a bunch of gift cards to send out to other people as a reward, and then asks the person to send the serial number so that they can email them out right away. I had that recently happen with a colleague, like I said, through an industry association, and it was coming from what appeared to be his cell phone number. It was through a text message, and it was just unusual that he would have asked me to do that. So I called him, and he actually answered and said that I was the fourth person that had called and mentioned that this was going on. So it could also happen through text message. And in the real estate industry, this is a tragic thing, but extremely common right now. It's an industry I'm trying to go after to help with education. Home buyers receiving an email from a title company with instructions on how to wire the down payment or the wire instructions go from the title company to the law firm, and the money is inadvertently wired to an incorrect account. I recently did a tabletop exercise with the Secret Service, and it was modeled on this specific real estate scam. It was based on a real incident that had happened in a commercial real estate transaction. A woman was working for the attorney, was drawing up the closing documents, had received the wire instructions from the title company. 12 hours later, received another email with the subject stating amended wire instructions. She didn't think anything of it. It's not uncommon that things change. And so she updated the documents, amended the wire instructions, and wired $3 million to an account in Russia. Thankfully, in this case, which is highly uncommon, they caught it very, very quickly because it was a high value purchase and transaction. So there were some checks and balances, and they immediately contacted the Secret Service and the FBI. And they were able to intercept the wire, and even got a step further because they knew the account. They were actually able to freeze the account. While the account was being frozen, 3 other multi-million-dollar wire transfers were being transferred into that account. So the speed in which we report is actually really important as well. And I'll get into that in a little bit. Does anybody have any questions about what a business email compromise is? Okay, great.
This is CSEN News.
Today, we're looking at tech support scams. Have you ever seen those Fallen movies, like Olympus Has Fallen or London Has Fallen, where the bad guys are dressed up like law enforcement and then they spring their trap and take over? That's exactly what tech support scams are like. Granted, it's not as exciting as those movies. No one is walking away from an explosion without looking back. But my point is, it's bad guys posing as good guys. And those scammers have different tactics. Sometimes they call and pretend to be a technician from a well-known company and say they found a problem with your computer. They might ask you to type in a code to give them remote access to your computer. Don't do it. Just hang up the phone. Another trick they use is pop-up warnings. They might make it look like an error message from your antivirus software and ask you to call a number or download the latest version to your operating system. Don't fall for it. Talk to your IT department before you take any action. These are attempts to gain access to your data or charge you money to fix a problem that doesn't exist. So remember, don't believe someone is trying to help you just because they tell you they are. For CSEN, I'm Tom Murphy.
So that's a really important one. Not only do we have to worry about the actual business email compromise, but we also have to consider, what the various different, I'm sorry. I apologize. My printer just started printing by itself. Speaking of compromises and network compromises. What I was trying to get at was that it's not just about the business email compromise, but it's kind of like the how, right? How does this happen? And I'll get in a moment into the various stages of a business email compromise attack. But before I get there, I did want to talk about the cost of business email compromise. And I always like to give a little bit of context because it's really important to recognize when something like this happens, that it's not just about like the wire transfer, for example, that happens, but there's also loss of reputational value and all of those things as well, plus insurance, which we've talked about in previous sessions. So according to the FBI, 35% of all cybercrime losses were attributed to business email compromise in 2021. Now, we've talked a lot in past sessions about ransomware and the millions of dollars that have been lost due to ransomware. But, when you think about the scope and the scale, ransomware requires quite a bit of sophistication. It requires some sort of malware, then there's negotiation, and there's a risk of not getting paid, right? There's always the risk that somebody's going to say, hey, I am going to just not pay the ransom, and I'm going to take my data from a backup source or just rebuild my database. So there is a higher risk to the cyber criminal for ransomware than there is in a business email compromise. And, due to the fact that most people reuse passwords and it's, easier to brute force password accounts, most people are not using multi-factor authentication. The notion of being able to get into and kind of understanding the ecosystem of someone's business or personal life, there's a higher opportunity for return through business email compromise. So same study from the FBI, same report rather from the FBI has indicated that there's between 2016 and 2021, $43 billion in adjusted losses for businesses and consumers, which through business email compromise. And in 2021, it was also the top cyber threat and complaint, with 19,000 complaints reported to the Internet Crime Complaint Center. And so the targets typically will include businesses and individuals because, what better way to get into a business than by targeting the individual first. And because of our work from home environment, we have to remember that most people are doing business on the same devices that they're also engaging in personal and private business, right? So we're doing our personal banking on the same laptop or computer that we also host our business email. So once they get in, they can also kind of start to figure out what you're doing and how you're doing it. And that's really where we have to be cognizant of how we're working and what devices we're using to work on. And again, passwords. So I wanted to go a little bit into, and this image is taken directly from the FBI's website on business email compromise, because I thought it was really important to kind of socialize the information that's being shared at the highest level of, our government and investigations, right? Because they're trying to get the message out as well. So I want to make sure that I'm evangelizing the information that's being provided by the FBI. So the first step in this process is identifying the target, right? So usually business email compromise is going to be conducted by organized crime groups. They target businesses in the US and abroad by exporting information available online to develop a profile on the company and its executives. If you participated in our previous sessions, we talked a lot about digital footprint and what digital exhaust looks like. So when you think about the information that we have out there, there's a lot of public information that we share and that others share about us to be able to create a profile about who we are and what we do, especially on platforms like LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. Once that's established, once the target is identified, established, and a profile has been created, they start sending out what's called spear phishing emails. So if you took the session on phishing, you'll know this, but I'll do a quick refresher. There's various different types of phishing emails. There's this traditional standard phishing email, which may look like, somebody sending FedEx information and they want you to click on something because they said you had a UPS or FedEx delivery. That's just a general phishing. Spear phishing is a little bit more targeted, where the email goes to specific individuals about a very focused topic that would be relevant to them. Whaling is when we focus an individual person, like a CEO or a director level C-suite executive, and that would be the much bigger kind of catch, if you will. And then that would be very, very specific, and that takes a lot more sophistication. So here we're talking about spear phishing emails and or phone calls to target a victim's company officials, typically in the financial department. The perpetrators use persuasion and pressure to manipulate and exploit employees' human nature. So things like somebody will call the finance department frantic, saying that, or sending a frantic email, saying that they are fill in the blank CEO or director's assistant, and they were supposed to initiate this bank transfer and they forgot. And if the boss finds out, I'm going to get in so much trouble. Can you please just push this through? If they find out, I'm going to get fired, and like start crying and doing this whole song and dance. Or, they're sending multiple emails with a lot of pressure saying that someone's going to get in trouble. The finance person's going to get in trouble, and the person just freaks out and sends the wire transfer, right? So usually there's a lot of persuasion, pressure, manipulation. Oftentimes there would be some sort of exchange of information that the victim is now convinced that they're conducting legitimate business, and they unwittingly will either send the wire over or buy the gift cards or whatever that particular scam looks like. And then once that wire transfer is initiated or the gift card information is transferred, it's pretty much most of the time lost, right? And so there may be a secondary transfer request. There may, depending on the time frame, depending on whether or not the perpetrator thinks that the individual has truly been compromised or truly been tricked and hasn't said anything to anybody. There may be multiple iterations of this, or they may target, if it's a large enough finance department, they may target multiple people at the same exact time in the finance department, whereas this transfer might happen 6 times at the same time. Does anybody have any questions about the stages of this attack? I'm going to get a little bit deeper into the social engineering aspect of it, because I think it's really important that we understand that the key to social engineering is they're gathering information from whatever sources that they can, whether it's online, through social media. It could be websites that you have that are public. In the case of the library, there are always a lot of events and services that are provided on the website. So be cognizant of the fact that, you know, some perpetrator might use that information to try to manipulate employees. It's the use of deception to manipulate individuals into divulging confidential or personal information that may be used for fraudulent purposes. So we're scraping public information on the internet and then using that to manipulate the person into doing something. And what do they do with this information? Well, once they have it, if it's, for example, in that tech support scam, they could get access to somebody's computer, get into their email because they're already logged into the email, create another email account with, admin privileges, and then be able to kind of go through the email system through Outlook 365, for example, and start sending out emails on other people's behalf. And then, of course, the email emails that are sent out are tailored carefully to the people that they're going to be sending it to. They craft these emails based on the environment in which they work, the company that they work for, the people that they work with. So it just looks very, very credible. So the methods that are used to engage the victims, as I said before, is spoofing an email account or a website. Sometimes they'll make it look exactly the same, or sometimes they might do something like in the case of John Kelly, one has a K-E-L-L-Y, the other one has a K-E-L-L-E-Y, right? So it looks like it's coming from that person. What most likely happened here is, they didn't have access to the John Kelly's actual email address, so they just created another one. They spoofed another one with a fake email address another email address behind this fake email address, and people just don't double check, right? They're busy, it's quick. They just want to get things off their plate and out of their inbox, so they'll respond or do what they need to do. The spear phishing emails, as I mentioned, they look like they're from a trusted sender to trick the victim into revealing confidential information. And this information, this might be, so the spear phishing and the spoofing, that might not even be the actual business email compromise. This might just be part of the grooming process, gathering more information. Maybe they haven't gotten enough information yet to be able to pull off whatever they're trying to pull off. So they'll send out these spear phishing emails to ask for things like company account information, calendar information, and other data that might give them more support for whatever it is that they're trying to do as their end game. And then, of course, malware. They can use malware, as in traditional phishing and ransomware, to infiltrate a network and gain access to the email accounts. So as we talk about these things, a lot of it sounds super familiar. If you've taken the ransomware session, it sounds super, super familiar. So I wanted to take a second to discern the difference between ransomware and business email compromise. Both are financially motivated, right? So both of them, the end game is to get money. But in a ransomware attack, it's typically overt in nature at the end. So the reconnaissance, the breaking into the network, the, swimming around the network to see where data is and all that, that's usually covert, and most likely it's, it doesn't get picked up. But when you're in the active part of the ransomware and you know that you've been hit by ransomware, it's now overt in nature. There's going to be active negotiations for payment. You possibly could have some engagement with the criminal actor. It involves the encryption and possible exfiltration of data. So it has a very specific purpose, right? It's taking your data, locking it up, and then asking you to pay for it to get it back. In the business email compromise, although it's financially motivated, it's also surreptitious in nature. It's usually covert. Usually when it's happening, you have no idea that it's happening. It's involving spoofing and tricking victims to send money, and it's not focused on data whatsoever. They don't care about your data. They don't want to get into your network. The only piece of data or information that they want is data that's going to support the scam that they're trying to pull off. So, but they're not looking to take databases of personally identifiable information or personal health information. They simply want to trick people to wiring money or sending gift cards or fill in the blank other financial thing to a fictitious account or location. So does anybody have any questions about the difference between ransomware and business email compromise? Okay. So as I mentioned earlier, reporting business email compromise, the faster you report it, the more likely, not necessarily definite, but more likely you are that you may be able to get the money back, right? So the first thing I would do is notify the financial institution immediately and request that they kind of contact the financial institution where the transfer was sent. Now, they may or may not be able to do that, but at bare minimum, notify your financial institution that you initiated a wire transfer with or a credit card payment with immediately so that they could freeze the account. It's just almost simultaneously as you're doing that, contact your local FBI field office. If you just Google FBI field office or local FBI field offices, there's one in New York City. If you are part of the lower Hudson Valley, you typically will be part of the New York City field office. There is a field office in Albany, and there's also a field office in Western New York, but ours would typically be the New York City field office. That's their actual HQ in New York. And then the other thing that you'll want to do is, and so in the last session that we did, we talked about incident response and business continuity. So these things should be part of your incident response plan for business email compromise. We talked last time about business incident response plan for ransomware. When it comes to cybersecurity attacks, there are different types of attacks. You have third-party attacks, you have ransomware attacks, you have business email compromise, you have data exfiltration, you have no data exfiltration. When is it a data breach versus just email compromise? So you need to report these things differently. So all of this should be part of your incident response plan. But the IC3.org, I would write that down, have it available, let everybody know about the IC3.org. That is the FBI's website. They receive those complaints through the website. They also gather their reporting annually through the complaints that have been filed through the website. I want to level set expectations. If the incident is not what's considered a high value incident, I wouldn't expect that the FBI is going to respond quickly. If you're talking about tens of thousands of dollars versus tens of millions of dollars, it's probably not going to be considered a priority. However, being that you're funded by the state government, that perhaps it may be prioritized. But just to level set expectations, you should absolutely reach out and let them know, because if there's a string of these types of crimes being committed, they need to know about it. But don't expect that you're going to get a quick response. Just level setting expectations. And you can also contact local law enforcement, depending on the local law enforcement's relationship with the FBI. They may or may not be able to help you, but I wouldn't contact them first. I would contact your bank, the FBI office, and then IC3 after that. Does anybody have any questions about the reporting piece of it? Also, just as a sidebar, you should still contact your attorney and your insurance company as if we would do that with, and I should have added that, so I apologize, but you should definitely contact your insurance company and your attorney to make sure that they are aware, and most likely RCLS as well, just to keep them posted. I know very recently, I don't know if Jen is still actively on, but I know recently one of the libraries did have some sort of breach of or a compromise of an email, because I received one of those emails as I'm a trustee for Mamakating Library, and I received one of those emails, which was unusual. So I immediately reached out to John to let him know that I received this very unusual email that appeared to be legitimate. And he quickly responded back to let me know, yes, one of the libraries did have a business email compromise, and that emails were being sent on behalf of a library director. So, yep, Jen's giving us the thumbs up. So what can we do? Well, as in the session we did on phishing, and also the original session we did on cybersecurity language and digital footprint, try to limit the information you share online publicly. The easiest way to protect yourself online is to lock down, if you are engaging in social media, and this is a no judgment zone. I engage in social media. I have a LinkedIn account, and I want to get into that for a minute as well. But limit the information that you share online publicly, and whatever you do have shared online publicly, be cognizant of the fact that that could be used against you. And I don't mean it in a way of, you know, you're going to be canceled. I mean it in a way that somebody could create a profile about you and then weaponize that information to try to trick you or people within your ecosystem that they're you. And I want to, before I go any further, do want to talk about LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is a bit of an anomaly. People purposefully put their information on LinkedIn as a business social media platform in order to gain new business, in order to gain traction on their programs, in order to find a new job or hire new talent. And so we're putting actively millions of data points about our organizations on LinkedIn, and then also not realizing that this could be a means of exploitation of your organization. So for example, if you're hiring and somebody goes and sends, sees that on LinkedIn, they may be able to take that information and then use it and exploit other people. So just be cognizant of the information that you're sharing online and the information that's specifically being put on LinkedIn about your organization, because what'll happen is if they look up Mamakating Library, for example, and there's a LinkedIn profile, and everybody who works at Mamakating Library has posted like their profiles and then they put their current employment, it links to Mamakating Library. So when I go to Mamakating Library, and I don't even know if they have a LinkedIn account, to be honest with you, but I'm using this as an example. I go to Mamakating Library, and now I've almost got an org chart. Anybody who's on LinkedIn is now connected to Mamakating Library. Well, what do people put on their LinkedIn profiles? Usually their business email accounts. So now I go to Mamakating Library. I click on Antoinette King, trustee for Mamakating Library. I go to her about information, and bingo, there's her Mamakating Library address. So now I just have to take that email address. I have to create a new email address, and I put that in the subject and makes it look like it's coming from me. And now I send out email addresses to all of her contacts that are in her LinkedIn account. And I never even had to go and get into her Outlook. So as you could see, it's a very easy way to manipulate people into thinking, because all the people in my contacts on LinkedIn are going to know me. So they're going to think that email is valid. So I'm just using that as a really overt example of how social media can be exploited, especially when organizations are posting big news or we're hiring or something. Mergers and acquisitions is another one, and I know it doesn't apply to libraries, but Oftentimes when companies will report that they're doing mergers and acquisitions, they'll try to exploit that because a lot of financial transactions are happening right at that time. So, and confusion because there are new people in new roles. So moving on is what we can do. Verify any unusual requests to perform financial transactions. If you are getting a request from somebody who appears to be a superior to perform a transaction that you wouldn't normally perform, don't call any phone numbers or respond to that email, but pick up a phone and either call that individual or call that department and let them know, hey, I've been asked to do this. I'm not sure if you really want me to do this. I don't even have access to that system. Make somebody aware that that email is going around your organization. Because if you're not the person that does it, it might get to the person that does do it, and they might accidentally just perform the function because it seems like it's legit. Carefully examine the email addresses, URLs, and spelling used in email correspondence. So when you receive an email, if you're on your phone, I've almost got duped quite a few times on my phone with these types of business email compromises. If you get an email that maybe just doesn't may seem just out of character of the individual, if you go on your phone and you hit the down arrow next to the email address, you're actually going to see the actual email address. So if the actual email address doesn't match the email address that it appeared to have come from, obviously this is a spoofing scam and you just want to delete it. I would also, not through email, but by phone or other means, notify the person whose email account has been compromised. Sometimes organizations will have on their website like info@fill-in-the-blank-company.com. And so that email address will often be spoofed because it's a public email address and people will just see the company information and think that it's legitimate. So just be cognizant and carefully look at those email addresses, especially if you're using a phone. Obviously, I say obviously, but I have to say it anyway, just to make sure. Do not download anything without verifying who it's from. In general, that's a great way to fall victim of ransomware as well as business email compromise. Employ multi-factor authentication whenever possible to avoid brute force password attacks. I know that using a third credential to log into your accounts is inconvenient, but the extra few seconds that you take to use multi-factor authentication could make the difference between falling victim for something like this, whether it be business email compromise or ransomware or not. There are so many different tools that are free. Google Authenticator, Apple has an authenticator, Microsoft has an authentication app. And so if you can use an authentication app that's the most secure, if that's not available or they don't support it, whatever the application is, you can use something like a token. You can use SMS text messaging, but it's very insecure because it's clear text. Or you can do a one-time password, which is you click on the link, you get emailed a one-time password, and then it's only good one time to log into your account. Again, it seems inconvenient, and I do know that it takes a little extra time, but that literally could be what's standing between you and becoming victimized in one of these types of attacks. If you are in finance or are responsible for financial transactions, verify payments and purchase requests, as well as any change of payment requests directly with the people involved. Sorry, that should say people involved. So if you have a new vendor, it's a good practice when they send an invoice, whether it be via email or actually via paper mail, to pick up a phone and verify that that is the information that's the address you should be mailing a payment to, that's the ACH directions that they gave you is the right ACH information, because that one step, again, can avoid you transferring or writing a check and mailing it to the wrong location. And if you receive an email that says, we've changed our address or we've changed our ACH information, I would highly recommend picking up a phone and calling the organization, calling the contact that you're supposed to be working with within the organization and verifying that that information is correct. And then, of course, be wary of requests that are pressing you to act quickly. Anytime you receive a frantic email or a frantic phone call from somebody indicating that you have to do this right now because I'm going to get in trouble, and they're putting the pressure on you and you still don't think it's right, but you feel bad for the person and then they start crying, take a minute, tell them you'll have to, please hold, and then try to verify the information beforehand. Typically, in cases like that. If you just ask them to hold, if they've called you, they'll hang up. And if you wait an hour or two after you receive a frantic email, usually you just won't hear from them again. If you do get a second email, absolutely notify somebody that this is going on, just to make sure that they're aware. And again, if you receive anything suspicious, always contact, whether it's your internal IT department or RCLS, to ask for help and just to confirm. It never hurts to verify something, take the extra precautions. It just adds that extra measure of protection. So this topic really wasn't too much to go super deep into. So we're a little bit, below the 1 hour mark. I do want to leave time open if anybody has any questions, if anybody's experienced a business email compromise. I'd love to hear from you all. But again, this is my contact information. I'm always available for, if someone has questions, please take down my email address. So questions, anybody has anything, let me know. All right, Jen, I think we're good.
All right, great. Thank you. No questions from the group for today? I see a thank you.
Thanks, Mary.
I have one question.
Yeah, Mike, go ahead.
I guess it's hard. I guess you want to make it at LinkedIn, like you're saying, but I guess make it private then, kind of, for just your friends, or
For social media.
Yeah, I guess in general, I guess make it as private as you can. Only invite trusted friends so that no one else can see it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry, my camera has been glitching out all day. I might need to get a new one. So I apologize if I look like I'm the Matrix right now. I just keep flashing. Yeah, so it's really important. So LinkedIn is, like I said, LinkedIn's a tough one. And I actually think that I overshare on LinkedIn often as well. So I'm really cognizant when I'm getting emails from people or text messages from people. I'm just really critical about anytime I receive information. My business phone number is on that particular account because I'm a business owner. So I will get random weird text messages from people pretending like they know who I am. And if I don't know the number, I just don't answer and I block it, right? So yes, all social media accounts should be locked down. It's actually a big section in my book. You can have a public and a private account. If you have a particular subject that you're really excited about and you want to have open dialogue with the world about, that's fine. Have a public social media account and then create a private social media account that's locked down just to people you know. So I have that. I have a business LinkedIn account, business LinkedIn. I have a business Instagram account. I have a business Twitter and a business Facebook account. Those accounts are wide open. Anybody can follow me. So I'm really, I never open DMs on Instagram, by the way, for a public account. I just never do. You will get the weirdest, most disgusting things. So just don't, if your account's full, don't open DMs. But I put it out there to put information about my business, my book, cybersecurity tips and tricks and all that kind of fun stuff. All my other accounts are locked down except for LinkedIn. But even on LinkedIn, I have my name is listed Antoinette K. period. So my full last name is not listed unless we're connected. So if someone tags me in a post on LinkedIn, it just shows Antoinette K. Now, there's enough information on my profile that they can figure it out. But you just do what you can. Also, my business email is on my LinkedIn profile and it's on my public other accounts, right? And so what I do on my end is I make sure that I have really good spam filters set up. And then I also I'm really cognizant of reading email and making sure. But I'm telling you, there have been a handful of times where I've almost gotten tricked through my phone because it looks different, right? And it's smaller and you're kind of like scrolling through. So you just have to be diligent about what information is publicly out there about you. And there's some stuff we can, in the state of New York, if you're a homeowner, your home address is listed privately. You can't get it. You can't get that removed. It's just out in public record. So it's unfortunate. I really advocate for that to be removed because if someone doesn't like me, they know where I live. I'm a homeowner. They can look it up. It's public record. If I'm a public employee, if I'm a state employee, I can go look up what any state employee makes, what their wages are. It's public information, right? So being aware is the first step. Social engineering has become super, super sophisticated. All of our voting information, that's all public information too. So your voting records, your vote, how you're registered, it's all public information. And that's how mis and disinformation is actually targeted. Not having anything to do with business email compromise, but because there's so many data points about us online, that's public information that could be scraped. Yeah, I've been getting so many text messages from sheriffs and governors and this and that. And I'm on the do not call list. And that's on my personal phone number. So I don't understand how that's happening. So I just keep the newest iPhone update has the ability to delete and report spam. And I just keep reporting every one of them as spam and blocking them. But yeah, it is challenging. And that's why we really need to be vigilant, especially in organizations that have a lot of public information, like such as the libraries. The services and things and people within the organization are often posted on the website. So it's a really easy way to exploit an individual at the library. Oh, I'm calling about this program, and I was a vendor there and I need my invoice to be paid. Oh, email it to me or fax it to me. We'll make sure we get it paid, that kind of thing. So really just being sure that you socialize with your employees, the various different types of ways that people are hip to email. They're hip to, checking email, but the old school calling social email, like that social engineering has been happening forever, right? Ever since we've had phones, people will be calling and trying to do phone scams. But it went away for so long and we don't really talk on the phone much that when somebody does call, it's like, oh, they must be calling for a reason, right? And the tech support one is a really big one. It's like, oh, I'm calling. And we actually, Jen, I don't know if you remember, in one of our first sessions, we talked about the fact that, somebody could pose as RCLS and you got to let your people know. John's like, we would never do that. So we need to get everybody that's within the RCLS system know that nobody's going to call and say, oh, I'm from RCLS. What email address do you want me to email you this link so I can update your computer? It's never going to happen. But if your employees don't know that, it sounds like it's coming from the right place and they manage our computer system. So yeah, we'll give them the link. Oh, Jen, you're unmuted.
Yeah, thank you. That was a great question. Thank you. Any other questions for today? All right, I'm going to stop the recording. And